Hey guys, welcome back to The New Critic, and today I'm gonna be ranking the entire Walking Dead universe. So this isn't something I'm gonna be doing very often. Maybe I'll do it every few years or so, because making these types of ranking videos are pretty exhausting, especially for a show that's been around for as long as it has. So I'm gonna be ranking seasons 1 to 9 of The Walking Dead, seasons 1 to 5 of Fear the Walking Dead, and season 1 of The Walking Dead World Beyond. I'm not including season 10 of the main show and season 6 of Fear the Walking Dead because they are not finished yet. They still have more episodes to come, so they don't count. Please keep in mind, spoilers are everywhere in this video, so you've been warned. So, 15 seasons in total. Let's get to it. Coming in at number 15 is season 5 of Fear the Walking Dead. Now, this wasn't as bad as everyone made it out to be, but it could have been so much better. You could argue that the show was doomed from season 4 onwards because of the soft reboot approach they had taken with that season, so there was no hope for season 5, but you know, anything is possible. Unfortunately, they ran this show into the ground with season 5. You know, the pacing was horrible, the last 2 episodes defied logic, things got really stupid. Some characters were given literally nothing to do, and there were several storylines that just kind of went nowhere. They were drawn out to the next season. But it isn't completely terrible. You know, we've got some new characters here like Grace and the rabbi. I keep forgetting his name. Oh yeah, never mind. John, Dory, and June got married finally. But beyond that, there really isn't much else I can recommend. It's not terrible, but it could have been so much better. And I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. Coming in at number 14 is season 7 of The Walking Dead. This is something I notice with the 7th season of some TV shows out there. They're bound to not be good, either because of fatigue or just bad writing or a change in showrunners or something. It happened with season 7 of Smallville, it happened with season 7 of 24, season 7 of Supernatural, and now it's happened with this season of this particular show. The pacing was horrible. Everything was needlessly drawn out, characters made dumb decisions, the zombies were relegated to the background mostly, and some episodes had some of the worst visual effects I've ever seen on a TV show. That being said, the season did get off to a great start with the premiere episode, and it had a couple of other good episodes here and there. I really enjoyed the finale as well. Alexandria's determination to team up with other communities and rise to the occasion against Negan and the Saviors, and some of the development of some of the characters in general was well handled, but it really wasn't enough to save this season. It's because of seasons like this that the show lost millions of viewers. It's not terrible, but it didn't do much for me, and it's the one I would really struggle to get through, even if I had to rewatch it a second time, even if I had to binge it. The only reason why it isn't lower than season 5 of Fear the Walking Dead is because it had some kind of direction, at the very least. And it had a better finale, and better character development. So, overall, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. Coming in at number 13 is The Walking Dead World Beyond, season 1. So, this is the first half of a 2-part limited series, with the second season coming around next year probably. It introduced us to a couple of new characters and this first new generation that is coming of age during the apocalypse 10 years after it started. It delved a little bit more into the CRM, but it definitely didn't live up to its full potential. It relied too heavily on flashbacks for character development, and sometimes flashbacks within flashbacks, which I don't mind, but can be jarring for a lot of people. The pacing is sluggish as usual, and it just felt like something was missing from the show. I do like the little hints and foreshadowings when it comes to what it is they do with the whole A and B mystery and the post-credit scenes. And the show wasn't as teen-oriented as I thought it was gonna be. It wasn't as corny and as melodramatic as it could have been. But overall, it's a decent foundation for what's to come in season 2. However, I kind of understand why a lot of people hate the show. But honestly, I don't think it's that bad. I actually kind of enjoyed it. And overall, I'm gonna give it a 7. So coming in at number 12 is Season 4 of Fear the Walking Dead. Now, Fear the Walking Dead definitely went downhill from here onwards, but Season 6 so far has been phenomenal. But it's not finished yet, so it's not going to be on this list. The biggest problem with this season is that so many changes were made just to accommodate for Morgan, and as a result, the fates of certain characters really angered me. Killing off Nick and Madison, not only in the same season, but in the same half, the first half, really cast a shadow over the rest of the show. Nick was my favorite character, but at the very least, Frank Dillon, who plays Nick, wanted to leave the show, so I can understand that, and he had a lot of good reasons for that. Meanwhile, killing off Madison was part of the showrunner's vision for season 4. It would have been interesting if, you know, she and Morgan had actually met, would have made for entertaining viewing, but ultimately it was decided that that wasn't going to happen, and that was such a wasted opportunity. The villains in the first half, the vultures, were so boring and generic. They had nothing going for them. Martha, in the second half, she was more interesting, but the second half was also incredibly slow and boring and almost a carbon copy of the back half of season 4 of The Walking Dead. So I still enjoyed this season. There's a lot of interesting new characters like John Dory and June and Althea, and I didn't mind Morgan being on the show, but to reinvent the show to the point where practically nothing that came before it mattered because of the time jump and so many stylistic changes and the decision to kill off Nick and Madison, you know, it all made me wonder, why couldn't they just give him his own show? Were they too lazy to do it? Did they still want to continue Fear the Walking Dead, but also accommodate for Morgan, and did they have to come to a compromise? I guess so. But overall, I still think it's very underrated. It just has a lot of things in it that piss me off. So I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. Coming in at number 11 is Season 8 of The Walking Dead. Now this was a slight improvement from Season 7 because it was a little bit more exciting, a lot more action-packed. It had some good character development. Carl's death was very controversial. I didn't mind it. And besides, Judith was still alive, unlike the comics where she died and Carl lived on. So if they'd killed off Judith like they did in the comics and then killed off Carl, I would have been upset, but at the very least, Judith stuck around. Meanwhile, Rick sparing Negan like he does in the comics, that was fine with me. But where the season fell short was in its slow pace and characters making dumb decisions, the zombies being relegated to the background again, and even the zombie guts retcon. I think that was a terrible mistake. Yes, this did actually happen in the comics, but it completely contradicts what was already established in season 1, and it's that zombie guts can be used to protect your scent from walkers. Overall, this season was fun but flawed, and I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. Coming in at number 10 is Season 5 of The Walking Dead. As I said in my review for this season, it's a bit overrated. You know, many considered it to be the peak of the show, but I disagree. It was actually one of my least favorite seasons at that time. It still is now, because the first half had a lot of issues. Even though the premiere episode was incredible, and I think that's my favorite episode in the entire series, I do feel like Gareth was underutilized. He and the last few remaining members of Terminus were killed off far too soon, and the whole Grady Memorial Hospital storyline, the build-up leading to its climax was effective, but for it to end the way it did, with Beth dying in such an idiotic fashion, and Noah, who she practically sacrificed herself for so that he could be free, none of that really mattered because he was killed off in the second half of the season anyway. The second half is better, even though it's a lot slower and more character driven, but the escape from Terminus in that premiere episode was incredible. The introduction to Father Gabriel and the characters entering Alexandria for the first time, all of that stuff was handled really well. And it's for those reasons that I still appreciate this season, and overall, I'll give it an 8.5. So coming in at number 9 is Season 6 of The Walking Dead. Now, it was kind of tough for me to decide which season I prefer, Season 5 or Season 6 of The Walking Dead, and I chose to go with this one for a couple of reasons. We got to see more of Morgan because he made a few appearances here and there in Season 5, and this was a proper return for the character. And even though a lot of people don't like his whole all life is precious philosophy, I actually found it interesting. And we got to see the wolves do a little bit more this time around. There was also a lot of tension between Rick and the community of Alexandria in terms of leadership. The characters were up against the biggest zombie horde they've ever faced, and the build-up leading to the introduction of the saviors in the second half was handled really well. I know a lot of people don't really like the Glenn fake-out and the Negan cliffhanger at the end of the season, but I actually didn't mind those things. What I didn't like was characters making dumb decisions from time to time, and that one cliffhanger in the penultimate episode where Dwight shot Daryl in the shoulder, and then he says it's going to be okay off screen, which made me wonder, why did he even shoot him in the first place? And just the general slow pacing of that season. The first 8 episodes, in fact the first 9 episodes, took place over the course of a single day, and what should have been the events of the 8th episode was dragged out to the 9th episode, which means you had to wait another 3 months to see what would happen next. But overall, I think it's a very underrated and underappreciated season, and I'm gonna give it an 8.7. Coming in at number 8 is Season 3 of Fear the Walking Dead. Now, this season is actually considered by many to be the peak of Fear the Walking Dead, and among some fans, the peak of the entire Walking Dead universe, and that's okay, more power to you. This season dealt with a lot of unique themes that had never been touched upon in the Walking Dead universe, that being racism, oxygen, water, and even the setting was interesting. It was in this ranch that was run by the military, and it had some fantastic character development, and the climax in the finale at the dam was pretty epic. But I still found the season to be somewhat overrated because it can be very slow in certain episodes. Some of the villains, I think they could have been handled a little bit better, like Dante only had 1 episode. I wish he had stuck around. And Proctor John, I do like him as a villain, but it felt like they just shoehorned him in the last 2 episodes and kind of rushed his development, even though he had made 1 or 2 appearances earlier on. And this isn't a big thing, it's a nitpick. It was nice to see that Daniel was still alive, but his return just kind of stretched plausibility a little bit. I mean, he is a war veteran, so there's that, but yeah, still, it's a small little nitpick. But overall, it's a fantastic season, and the show really suffered after this. That is until Season 6 came around. But a lot of the characters from the first 3 seasons of the show are long gone. There's only a few of them left. And I kinda wish that some of them had stuck around a bit longer. So overall, I'll give it an 8.7. Coming in at number 7 is Season 2 of Fear the Walking Dead. So in this season, the characters from Season 1 went on Victor Strand's boat called the Abigail, and they were on their way to Mexico, and we got to see what life was like there during the outbreak and how people had adapted to it. We also had some good character development, especially for Nick, who's my absolute favorite character. It had a fantastic finale, and just seeing the characters at sea for a couple of episodes was something that the franchise had never really tackled before. What I don't like is the fact that it keeps juggling between certain villains, like there was the pirates, but they only stuck around for a couple of episodes, and Marco, who's this cartel leader, didn't really show up until the second half, and we had some great villains, but the show was juggling between too many of them. And the characters made some dumb decisions here and there, but overall, it was one of the more ambitious seasons of this entire franchise, and I really enjoyed it for that. So I'm going to give it a 9.7 out of 10. Coming in at number 6 is Season 4 of The Walking Dead. Now this season had a lot to offer. It had the flu storyline, where the characters all get infected at the prison by this flu virus, which kind of reminds me of the coronavirus in a way.
You step outside, you risk your life. You take a drink of water, you risk your life. And nowadays you breathe, and you risk your life. Every moment now. You don't have a choice. The only thing you can choose is what you're risking it for. Now, I can make these people feel better and hang on a little bit longer. I can save lives. That's reason enough to risk mine. And you know that.
And we saw the governor's return in this season, tried to humanize him a little bit. We got the mid-season finale, which was one of the best mid-season finales in the entire franchise. The second half was a lot slower, but more character-driven. The characters were all on their way to Terminus in groups, and they all had some kind of obstacle to face or some kind of baggage to carry with them, and it was compelling to watch. And the finale perfectly leads up to the beginning of Season 5. I have very little to complain about. I will say the first episode where Rick encounters this Irish lady while looking for survivors, the fact that she was probably going to try and kill Rick was so obvious, and that whole thing went nowhere. It just felt like filler. Other than that, I don't really have a lot to complain about. You know, nothing major. So I'm gonna give this a 9.7. Coming in at number 5 is Season 3 of The Walking Dead. This is when the prison was introduced. This is when Lori and T-Dog died, and nobody expected them to die in the exact same episode. This is when Judith was born. This is when the governor was introduced, and then Andrea met Michonne, and they ended up in Woodbury. Marla returned, and he had an interesting reunion with Daryl, and he slowly redeemed himself throughout the season. Even the 5 prisoners from the comics appeared, and it was cool to see them. The finale was great, even if I have problems with it, and it had some of the best action in the series. I just don't like the fact that most of the prisoners were killed off by this season, especially Axel, because he actually sticks around a bit longer in the comics than he does on the show. Andrea was a little bit frustrating at times. You know, sleeping with the governor, which I understand, but having a chance to kill him and not taking it and stuff like that. But I do understand that she was trying to make peace between the prison and Woodbury, and she failed, so I don't mind that. So I'm okay with her dying by the end of the season. And overall, this was a fantastic season, and I'm gonna give it a 9.7. Coming in at number 4 is Season 9 of The Walking Dead. This is the season that saved the show thanks to showrunner Angela Kang. The show was terrifying again. It had great villains in the form of the Whisperers. Rick had a great send-off. Daryl and Carol were really able to carry the show from this point onwards. It introduced a bunch of new characters. It had interesting development for Negan. There was a time jump after Rick's disappearance. We got to see Judith much older now. It had the iconic Pike scene from the comics, and I think it was handled really well. And it was the true return to form for The Walking Dead. Is it perfect? Definitely not. I do wish that the finale had involved the Whisperers a little bit more. But other than that, everything else is fine. And overall, I'll give it a 9.7. Coming in at number 3 is Season 2 of The Walking Dead. Now when I first watched this season, I liked it. I was a bit disappointed, but it's grown on me ever since. The slower, more character-driven nature of it, the fact that the characters were still adapting to the apocalypse, except Shane had adapted to it much quicker. And speaking of Shane was the best character this season. He had a lot of great moments. His conflict with Rick was fantastic, and I'm glad that he stuck around a bit longer than he did in the comics. We got our introductions to Herschel's farm and his family, including Maggie and Beth. The beginning of Glenn and Maggie's relationship was handled really well, and the finale was fantastic. I do have some issues with it, like Lori crashing her car on an empty road, and Andrea berating Dale, nearly killing Daryl, randomly having sex with Shane, and then that kind of goes nowhere afterwards. But other than that, everything else is fantastic. It's very underrated and it's very rewatchable, and overall I'd give it a 9.7. Okay, so now for my top 2. We have Season 1 of The Walking Dead and Season 1 of Fear the Walking Dead. And this was actually very difficult for me to decide on, and at one point I actually considered tying them both at number 1. But ultimately, as of this recording, I'm gonna say that my number 2 is gonna be Season 1 of The Walking Dead. Now, this is my favorite season of the main show because I feel like Frank Darabont, as the showrunner at the time, did the best job of capturing the dread and the terror and the uncertainty of a zombie apocalypse better than any of the other showrunners. This was also back in the simpler days of The Walking Dead, when the main focus was on Rick and the cast wasn't as big as it is now currently, allowing for more development of each character. Back when the characters were just adapting to the outbreak, just as we were adapting to the show itself. And it had some of the most iconic zombies in the entire franchise, like Bicycle Girl, and the little girl that Rick encounters at the beginning. And it was also our first introduction to Rick's pronunciation of Carl, or should I say, Carl.
Carl! 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 Carl!
There's a lot of characters in this first season that are long gone, and it's kind of nice to go back and revisit the season because of that. The zombies in this season were a lot smarter than they were throughout the rest of the show, and I actually liked these zombies, so it's nice to go back and revisit that as well. And overall, I have very little to complain about. It's not perfect, but it's amazing, and it was the first time I had ever sat down and binged any TV show for myself, and it was so rewarding, and it got me through a very difficult time in my life, and I'm very grateful for it. And overall, I'll give it a 9.7. But my number 1 pick is going to be Season 1 of Fear the Walking Dead. Now, this is the only season in the history of The Walking Dead that I think I could say is perfect, flawless. I don't have any issues with it. So this was a prequel to the main show, and it showed us how the outbreak started in the first place. It was an interesting experience. and we got to see things that we don't usually get to see on the main show. There's one episode involving protests, there's the military, there's a quarantine and a curfew. The zombies were actually terrifying again because they looked more like rabid humans than zombies. And most importantly, it had memorable characters. And even though not all of them were fully developed until later on in the series, I still appreciate their introductions, especially Nick, who is my absolute favorite character, and I appreciate the fact that he was flawed at first, but he slowly began to overcome these flaws later on in the series until his tragic death. And just like season 1 of The Walking Dead, it was just 6 episodes, short and sweet, and I thought the ending to the season was fantastic, and I liked how it, laid the groundwork for season 2, and overall, I'd give it a 10 out of 10. So yeah, that was my mega ranking of the Walking Dead universe. Next time, I'm gonna be reviewing season 2 of The Mandalorian in its entirety. So thank you all for watching. Please be sure to like the video, share it and subscribe, and hit the notification icon. Be safe during this time, and I'll see you soon.